Hey guys, happy Saturday, Hailey here, and by popular demand, today's video will be addressing a question about the personal insight questions. So as you all know, I have like a whole playlist of videos dedicated to the UC application and helping guide you through it. But I realized that I don't actually have a video regarding like what an appropriate topic is. There are a lot of times where I've talked about like what not to say on the application and specifically in the personal insight question essays, but I get a lot of people asking me like, I don't even know where to begin. I think the most important piece of advice I can offer to you guys is to write from the heart and write about something that you are actually passionate about, because if you're not, it will definitely show through. And it doesn't have to be like some sob story. It doesn't even have to be terribly interesting. Like, I think if you're really a skilled writer, you're able to make something very mundane very interesting and write about it in a way that actually engages the reader. And I think that's exactly what they're looking for, because the whole point is obviously, you know, the point is to kind of get a sense of your writing. But more than that, the point is to get an idea of who you are as a person. So you should be telling a story about who you are as a person. If it's not something that says who you are and is something that you would show or share with people that actually explains who you are as a person and why you became that way, then it's probably not worth talking about in essays. So it's very difficult, and I can't really advise on like what a good topic is, because it not only, the topic selection is important, but how you choose to tell that story is also important. And also it depends on like what experience you've gotten out of that story, or out of that experience, what you've learned from that experience. These essays should be showing some sort of character growth and character development. Like if you've reached the end of the essay, you're at the conclusion, and you haven't changed personally in some way over the course of that story, it's probably not the right topic. Like it should show like definitely how you started out, kind of an explanation of the situation, what happened that made you change your mind about whatever, how you're feeling or your situation. And then the end should be the resolution documenting how you are now as a result of whatever you went through. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be some story. Like people often come to me and say like, oh, like nothing tragic has happened in my life. You know, like my mom didn't die of cancer when I was 10, or I didn't grow up in the slums or something like that. Like that is not the point. It doesn't have to be about that. If you guys have read my essays, rather if you've listened to me read my essays, if you haven't, please check out this video. But you'll know that my essays are pretty much just a description of my everyday life. And yeah, there are some pretty extraordinary things that I have been fortunate enough to experience, but really like at the end of it, like I talked about my family, I talked about my job, I talked about not having money, and I talked about going to community college. Those are 4 pretty basic things that I think honestly most people my age could relate to. It's not what I said so much as how I said it. And I mean, that is one of the things when it comes to effectively communicating, and that's what they're trying to get a sense of through your writing. Like your job is to intrigue them, to make them want to know more about you, to make them think like, just based off reading your essay, like this person could be capable of so much at the University of California. That's the whole point of it. So, you know, if you're talking about something as simple as like, I don't know, like making pancakes on a Saturday morning with your dad, like you can make a whole story about how that impacted your life if you are careful about it. And that, you know, that's why I really encourage people to start early. And if you're watching this video, you're probably not starting early. I'm not here to shame you, but I think that so many people realize like, you know, they start in November and then they realize like, this is actually really hard. Like, yeah, it's really hard. This is probably one of the most important things you'll ever write in your life if you want to get a higher education. So, you know, it requires a lot of thought. It requires a lot of effort and refining and fine tuning. Like you will write it, and then if you're doing it right, you should reread it and rewrite it again 50 times before you submit it. Like I guarantee the very first thing I wrote was horrendous. Like I remember the very first thing I wrote, I don't remember which prompt it was, but like I think it was like, what's a quality or skill that like is really unique to you that you're really proud of, and I wrote about like astrology or something. Like, is that a joke? Like, I was trying to be like deep, but I missed the point. Like, the point is not to be deep. The point is just to talk honestly and candidly about yourself as a person. So honestly, like, don't overthink it, I think is my advice. Like, just think creatively. Don't think too hard, if that makes sense. Like, take something that seems very ordinary to you, but you know, maybe if you've mentioned it to someone just in conversation and they've asked you more about it and they seemed interested about it, like maybe that's something that you could talk about. I'll give you guys an example. This was the prompt, and my response was about my job. So I did work at a bridal boutique, which yes, was pretty unique, especially for, you know, a 17-year-old in high school. But that's not the point, because the point was I wasn't talking about like, oh, I worked with this designer and I did this and like this many dresses, like like it wasn't about that. It was really about, I cannot have one moment of peace in this apartment. It was really about what skills I developed as a result of that job, which you could do if you were working at Kleinfeld's or if you were working at Wetzel's Pretzels. Like, I'm telling you guys, you may think that your job is stupid or, you know, kind of just like entry level or dumb, but it's like, the thing is, like, they realize that the people writing these essays are kids. Like, they know that you guys most likely aren't gonna have some crazy, extraordinary lifetime movie of a life. Like, that's the whole point of these essays. You just have to be creative about it. And the way I wrote about it was interesting. Like, I talked about how I started out as a cashier at this job, and then there was an opportunity to move into a different department where I was like kind of actually doing something and kind of actually working with customers on a more personal level than like transactional level. So I talked about that. I talked about how the opportunity presented itself, and that was really where I talked about kind of taking initiative, and I talked about how I helped the department improve and like sales improve and customer relations improve and all this sort of stuff. And at the end I wrapped it up and talked about what I learned, like who I am now as a result, not only as like an employee, but also just as a person. So, I mean, that's one example. I also talked about like not having money and how my family like dealt with a financial crisis, which is like, honestly, if you're around my age, like even if you're in high school right now, like this is probably something that you can remember on some level. Like, I was pretty young when it happened, but you know, it made an impact, and it's an impact that like still is felt in my family today. So that's another example of something that's worth talking about. Like, you may think like, oh, like the financial crisis, like whatever, everyone went through that. Yeah, everyone went through that. But like, you have a story to tell as a result, you know? So it's like, it's just those little things that are like part of your life that you may not think twice about. You need to realize that someone else looking at your life under a microscope might actually be like, you know what, that's really interesting. I want to hear more about that. And it's your job to tell that story in a way that keeps them engaged, but also explains who you are. That is the main thing. They want to know who you are. They want to know who they're admitting onto the campus, and they just want to be confident in the fact that the person that they choose to admit will go on to do great things, not only at UC, but beyond. I hope that clarifies things for you all a little bit more. Unfortunately, I can't give you like a list of topics that would be appropriate to talk about because it really depends on your personal life. That's why they're called personal insight questions. You have to look within. And I know it sounds cheesy, but I always think a good way to go about it if you're kind of lost and don't really know where to start is just to look at examples. So as I mentioned earlier, please check out my video where I read my own personal insight question essay responses. I'm sure there are tons of other people who have done this on YouTube, even if they're not a transfer student, or maybe you're not even a transfer student. Like, whether you read the transfer or the freshman essays, they are different prompts, but they kind of get at the same thing, and they're going to be looking for the same things in the student anyway. So I would just recommend looking at examples and using that as an inspiration for what you can do with your own essay. Thank you all so much for watching. Please check out the other videos in my UC application playlist if you haven't already. And also, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'm constantly posting new material about transferring, community college, and UCLA life. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next Saturday at 3 p.m. Bye!